Channel 11 in your corner at 6.
The Greene County Sheriff says he completely supports the deputy that tased an 81-year-old woman earlier this week. Good evening, I'm Sarah Diamond.
And I'm Josh Smith. News Channel 11 has obtained tonight these. More than 40 reports from the Greene County Sheriff's Department. They're dating back. Some of these are from June of last year. In these reports, several state that the woman involved in this case has dementia. Yeah, Sheriff Pat Hankins told News Channel 11's Carissa Winstead his deputy had 14 seconds to make a life or death decision after investigators said she threatened police.
Sheriff Hankins says the deputy's only other two options were to shoot the woman or to take a chance at risking his life. Deputies have been called to 81-year-old Buenos Irwin's home more than a dozen times. And according to reports obtained from the Sheriff's Department, she has dementia and is living in deplorable conditions.
Sunday, September 24th, Greene County deputies respond to a home on Wilkerson Road in Mossheim. 81-year-old Buenos Irwin's son calls 911 telling dispatchers his mother is being combative. According to an incident report, Irwin was using a broom to beat on cars and was yelling. That report says she has dementia and says she often sees things that aren't there. In fact, there's a lengthy history of calls coming from Irwin's home, more than 40 calls dating back to June of last year. Sometimes Irwin calling multiple times a day claiming there are people on her property, but when officers arrive, they can't find anyone. In a complaint call on January 2nd, a deputy went inside her home and found the floor was about to fall in, and there was an odor of animal waste that could be smelled from outside. Her son, who lives next door, told them he was unable to help his mother, and he made a statement that he wanted them to take her to jail. Later that month, the call was placed to Adult Protective Services, but the report says nothing could be done unless she was running the streets naked. This past Sunday, deputies left the scene but were called back about 40 minutes later. The report says when they arrived back on scene, they saw Irwin had a garden rake in her hands. She then started down the sidewalk toward the lieutenant saying, "Get off my land." But the lieutenant says he was in the road about 50 feet from her, not on her land. That's when the report says she advanced towards the lieutenant with the rake in her hands in a threatening manner. When she got about 10 to 12 feet away from him, the report says he used his taser because he thought an attack was coming. Irwin fell to the ground and he cuffed her. EMS arrived and removed a taser probe from her thigh. That's when she became combative again, threatening to kill all the officers on scene. EMS took her to the hospital for evaluation. The report indicates charges are pending. Carissa Winstead, News Channel 11, in your corner.
We reached out to family members. They declined to comment on that case.
Cowardly cop fears for his life, tasers 81-year-old grandma with dementia. An elderly grandma was rushed to the hospital after she made a cop fear for his life and deploy his taser, causing her to collapse in the road. By Matt Agarist, September 28, 2017. Greene County, TN. Greene County Sheriff Pat Hankins is standing up for his deputy this week, noting that he supports his deputy's decision to deploy his taser on an 81-year-old woman on Sunday. Apparently, 81-year-old women with dementia holding gardening tools are now cause for cops to fear for their lives. The family of Buenos Irwin has now hired an attorney after police showed up to their home responding to a 911 call for help and ended up tasering the very old woman in the street. The sheriff said he supports his deputy's decision because the officer was forced to think fast and only had 14 seconds to decide what to do. According to Hankins, the deputy's only options were to kill the woman or take a chance risking his life. Naturally, bravery was out of the question apparently, so was walking backward. As WJHL reports. Advertisement. Some sheriff's office reports we obtained claim she suffers from dementia and often sees things that aren't there. On Sunday, September 24, Greene County deputies responded to a home on Wilkerson Road in Mossheim. Irwin's son called 911 telling dispatchers his mother was being combative. According to an incident report, Irwin was using a broom to beat on cars and was yelling. That report says she has dementia and says she often sees things that aren't there. According to reports, there have been more than 40 calls for help from Irwin's home in just the last year. By all measures, police were familiar with the elderly woman. However, the deputy who responded was apparently unfamiliar with showing any type of courage in the face of the very tiny amount of danger, if it can even be referred to as such, presented by an 81-year-old woman holding a rake. Read more. Video exposes lying cops after they break handcuffed man's skull open and claim he did it to himself. Many of the calls to 911 from Irwin's home were actually made by her. Her dementia often caused her to see people on her property who were not actually there. However, when the deputy came this time, she could see him, and so she demanded he leave her property. According to the report, this past Sunday, deputies left the scene but were called back about 40 minutes later. The report says when they arrived back on scene they saw Irwin had a garden rake in her hands. Sheriff Hankins said Irwin had already knocked out several windows with the rake when they arrived. According to the deputy, Irwin started walking toward him saying, "Get off my land." However, the deputy claims he was 50 feet from her, in the road, not on her land. Clearly in a mentally diminished state, however, Irwin began walking toward the deputy holding the rake. To justify deploying the taser, which could have easily killed the 81-year-old, the deputy said she was holding the rake in a threatening manner. Instead of backing up, walking away, grabbing the rake, or doing anything that required even the smallest amount of bravery, the cop made sure he wouldn't have to risk a single little hair on his body and deployed his taser. Irwin was 10 to 12 feet away when this deputy felt the need to take her out because he thought an attack was imminent from an 81-year-old grandma with a garden tool. When the taser hit her, she fell to the ground. Only then did the officer move in to place her in handcuffs. Read more. Cops jumping ship, from ruining lives for marijuana to cultivating it. According to WJHL, EMS took her to the hospital for evaluation. The report indicates charges are pending. Every day, in assisted living facilities across the country, elderly men and women with dementia lash out at what they perceive as a threat. And, every day, unarmed healthcare workers calm them down without having to taser them. A police officer deploying a taser on a harmless 81-year-old woman illustrates the ominous training of police departments today. Do not be brave, do not risk injury, swiftly and immediately escalate force to avoid having to employ any heroic action to help an 81-year-old woman with dementia. God forbid you take a tiny risk to remove a rake from an elderly woman. After all, when your only tool is a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail.
Hey Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County COPWATCH, and I'd like to thank you for all your years of support through the years. As a result, this channel has grown and allowed me an equity partnership in carmarshal.com. Please take the time to check them out. They help you buy and sell your next car, even have a negotiating tool to save you from the hassle of haggling with multiple dealers. The link is in the description below. Please click and help support and give if you can too through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks again.